You were never meant to fit. Not into their boxes, not into their expectations, not even into the ancient prophecies whispered about in sacred texts or coded into myth. Chosen one, your existence is not the climax of an old story. It's the quiet, earth-shattering end of it. You see, for centuries the world has clung to patterns, prophecies built on cycles, revolutions that simply replaced one oppressor with another, kingdoms that rose, only to mirror the very darkness they once vowed to destroy. And somewhere along the line, they started mistaking repetition for redemption. But you are not here to complete the old narrative. You are here to interrupt it, to bring the curtain down on what was never truly divine in the first place. From the moment you entered this world, something didn't sit right. Not with you, but with the energy around you. Have you ever noticed how early in life, people started treating you like a disruption even before you could understand words? The energy in rooms shifted when you walked in. You confused people, not because you were loud or rebellious, but because you carried a frequency that whispered, "This isn't it." Chosen one, your soul carries the vibration of closure, of reset, of divine defiance against anything that pretends to be holy, but operates through fear, control, and cycles of guilt. You're not a chosen one in the way people romanticize it, like you're here to ascend a throne that's been waiting for you. No. You're here to burn that throne down because it was built on the backs of the broken. The old prophecy, they tried to hand it to you like a crown. They said, "This is your destiny. Walk this sacred path. Fulfill what was written." But every time you got close to it, something inside of you recoiled. You couldn't fake alignment. You couldn't walk a road just because others did before you. Your soul said no, and maybe you blamed yourself at first. Maybe you wondered why you couldn't just be like everyone else, fulfill what was expected of you, find comfort in the script. But deep down, you knew that prophecy wasn't yours to fulfill. It was yours to end. You weren't sent to perpetuate cycles. You were sent to break them. This isn't a light mission. You know that already. There's a reason your journey has felt like walking through fire barefoot. A reason why comfort always seems to be 2 steps ahead or 1 betrayal behind. It's not that you're cursed. It's not that you're unlucky. It's that you're carrying the spiritual weight of conclusion. You're the punctuation mark at the end of a long, painful sentence. And that's why people don't know what to do with you. People, especially spiritual ones, love prophecy. They love predictions and patterns. They love being able to say, "This is how it's always gone. So this is how it will go again." But you, chosen one, you are the anomaly. You are the break in the pattern. You are the proof that what once was does not have to be. That's why they misunderstand you. That's why you feel spiritually homeless in circles that talk about God, but can't recognize when He sends someone who doesn't look like the last messenger. Let's get something straight. Your disobedience to old structures is not rebellion. It is alignment. Divine alignment. You were never meant to obey systems that misuse the name of God. You were never meant to conform to the shadow of something holy. You were born to walk into temples built on lies and turn over the tables. Like Christ did. Like Moses did. Like every divine disruptor who didn't come to be liked, but to be light. You are not here to maintain the illusion of holiness. You are here to reintroduce its essence. And yes, that means your journey often looks messy. Your path is not neat and predictable. It's jagged, it's raw, it's full of detours and unmarked roads because you're not following the map, they're still using the old one. But you are the compass now. You are the new direction. There's a reason you felt spiritually restless. A reason why no doctrine has ever felt like a full home. Why no leader has ever fully earned your trust. Because deep down, you know the truth that the ones they call prophets were often just placeholders. They held space for the real wave. And now the wave has come, and it's you. That's why you see through the layers. Why you can spot manipulation where others see miracles. Why you feel sick around false authority. Your spiritual immune system is alert, trained not by tradition, but by divine fire. You were forged in isolation so you would never mistake popularity for presence. So you'd know the voice of the Spirit for yourself and not through someone else's translation. This is why your silence carries weight. Your presence, even without explanation, disturbs what's false. You don't need to shout. You just have to be, because you represent the ending of an age. And endings make people uncomfortable. Chosen one. You were born to stand in sacred defiance, not against God, but against everything pretending to be Him. Now, understand this, the prophecy you were handed is not evil, it's expired. It served its time. It got the world to this moment. But it cannot take us any further. And the only way forward is you. You don't need to rebel to be revolutionary. You just need to live in your truth. And your truth is this: you were not sent to fulfill what was written. You were sent to write what's never been seen. There's an old energy that still lingers around you, trying to convince you to go back, to step into the script, to pick up the robe, the crown, the staff that someone else dropped. But don't be fooled. That robe doesn't fit. That crown was never your size. That staff points in the wrong direction. You weren't born to continue the story. You were born to stop it. And once you accept that, really accept that, you'll stop asking for permission. You'll stop waiting for confirmation from people who can only measure you by outdated standards. You'll stop watering yourself down just to be digestible to minds that were never meant to understand your frequency. You'll walk like a finisher. Talk like a transition. Move like a gate closer, because that's what you are. You're the last echo of an ancient cycle and the first whisper of something brand new. They keep trying to fit you into their script, don't they? Like some sacred character that just hasn't found their role yet. But what they don't realize is, you weren't cast to continue the play. You were sent to stop the performance altogether. Chosen one, you are the shift, not the continuation. You're not the next version of what has been. You are the unveiling of what has never been seen before. And that's why they don't know what to do with you. Because you don't follow the archetypes. You don't echo the heroes they were trained to recognize. You show up with divine authority, but no title. With holy wisdom, but no lineage they can trace. Your power doesn't look like theirs. It doesn't submit. It doesn't bow. It radiates. They wanted you to be the next Moses, or the next David, or the next Esther. But your spirit said no. Not because you don't respect them, but because your assignment isn't to repeat history. It's to shift reality. You don't mimic old templates. You reveal the new blueprint, and that new blueprint doesn't make sense to the ones still clinging to the old map. It's like trying to use a candle to explain electricity. You are the energy that came after the fire, and yet They keep holding you to the standard of the flame. But you were never meant to burn out like they did. You were meant to light up the unseen. Have you ever noticed how people project their expectations onto you without even asking who you are? They assume you're meant to follow in their footsteps, uphold their legacy, keep the old ways alive. But each time you try, your soul buckles, it aches, it resists. Because you're wired for the future, not the past. That resistance is sacred. Don't override it. It's divine friction, meant to keep you from conforming to outdated assignments. It's your inner compass, refusing to let you drift off course. You may feel the pressure to be palatable, to be predictable, to be peaceful in ways that make others comfortable. But you weren't sent here to soothe the old world. You were sent to end it. You're not here to walk a paved road. You're here to break the concrete and let the roots reclaim the ground. And yes, that means sometimes you walk alone. But what's a crowd to someone who was born to change the course of everything you were never meant to blend in? The sacred doesn't blend. It disrupts. Think about the story of Joan of Arc. A teenage girl with no military training, no noble background, no religious title. But she carried the fire of conviction that burned through the illusions of her time. The church didn't understand her. The generals didn't trust her. The people were confused by her. But God backed her. Heaven confirmed her. And even though the world tried to extinguish her flame, history remembers her as a divine interruption to everything that was supposed to be. That's you, chosen one. You are the unexplainable answer to questions they've been asking for centuries. You are the divine glitch in their sacred system. And instead of trying to explain yourself to people still worshiping expired templates, maybe it's time you stood tall in your mystery. Let them stare. Let them speculate. Let them stumble over your silence. You weren't designed to be obvious. You were designed to be undeniable. Now, here's something most won't tell you when you start walking in your true calling, and the one that doesn't mirror anything they've seen before. You will trigger people's fear, not because you're dangerous, but because your presence exposes the limits of their beliefs. You reveal how small their God really is, how rigid their structures are. And rather than expand, they retreat. Rather than listen, they label. Heretic, rebel, delusional, lost. But here's the truth. You're not lost. You're just beyond their map. You're off script because heaven gave you a new one. One that doesn't require permission. One that doesn't need applause. One that doesn't need to look anything like what's come before. And that's terrifying to the religious spirit, because that spirit thrives on predictability. But the Spirit of God, the living, breathing, moving Spirit, it's unpredictable, untamable, wild in the most holy way. And that's the spirit you carry. So the next time someone tries to reduce you to a role they're familiar with, pause and ask, am I here to play a part, or am I here to break the stage? Because this stage is crumbling. Chosen one. The lights are flickering. The curtains are heavy with dust. The script has holes. The cast is tired. And heaven is ready to close the show. Not with a dramatic ending, but with a quiet, blazing arrival of someone like you. You're not flashy, but you're fierce. You're not loud, but your energy speaks. You don't need a title, because your presence confirms everything they need to know. They don't have language for who you are, and that's okay. Because you didn't come to fit their language, you came to speak a new one. So let the old voices mumble their confusion. Let the ancient echoes try to predict your next move. You already know you weren't sent to follow their prophecy, you were sent to end it. That prophecy, it ran its course. It brought the people to the edge of awakening. But it can't take them further. And that's where you come in, not as a savior, but as a signal that something new has begun. You won't always have the words to explain yourself, and you won't always feel sure of your next step. But you will know one thing deep in your bones: this path has never been walked before. And it's your feet that were chosen to mark it. This is what it means to be the shift. It means you'll feel out of place until you accept that your place doesn't exist yet. You're not here to join something. You're here to birth something. You're not the continuation. You're the correction. Chosen one. Stop waiting for someone to crown you. You are already carrying the oil, and when you walk into spaces where the old prophecy still reigns, you'll notice the tension, the sideways glances, the subtle dismissal. Because deep down, they can feel what you represent, and what you represent makes their position feel fragile. But don't dim your light to protect their illusion. You're not arrogant for being aware of your calling. You're not selfish for refusing to play small. You're not disobedient for following the spirit over tradition. You are aligned. You are anointed. You are the shift. And while others are busy guarding thrones that are sinking into dust, you're out here building altars that touch heaven, not made by hands, not defined by names, but burning with truth, with presence, with fire that doesn't consume but awakens. This is who you are. You're not the next. You're the new. You've probably asked yourself 1,000 times, why don't I fit in anywhere? You've walked into rooms, sat in circles, joined communities, attended services, and still felt like an outsider looking in. And the answer isn't that you're broken. It's not that you're lost. It's that you were never supposed to belong to those systems in the first place. Chosen one. Listen closely. You are misunderstood, not because you're in error, but because you're not a part of the framework others are trying to preserve. You weren't built for the old structures, you came to reveal their expiration. That's why your presence feels like friction. That's why even when you're quiet, people feel exposed. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. Your energy itself disrupts the illusion. The systems you've tried to engage with, religious, social, even familial, they were created to reinforce patterns, to keep people in rhythm with the old song. But you don't carry that rhythm. You came with a new sound, and when it doesn't match theirs, they assume you're out of tune. But the truth is, you are tuned to heaven's current frequency, not the echo of yesterday's revelation. Have you noticed how often the doors that open for others seem bolted shut when you try to walk through? It's not rejection. It's redirection. It's protection from being captured by something you were meant to dismantle. The favor others receive inside the system isn't a sign that you've failed. It's a sign that they still have something to learn there, and you've already graduated. You're not being punished. You're being preserved. And that preservation comes with a cost. It costs you comfort. It costs you certainty. Sometimes, it costs you connection. Because when you carry a disruptive assignment, it means you'll be misunderstood by the very places you hoped would welcome you. It means your loyalty will be questioned, your motives misjudged, your silence interpreted as arrogance, your absence seen as rebellion. But let me remind you, Jesus wasn't welcomed by the temple. Neither was Jeremiah. Neither was John the Baptist. Divine messengers are rarely embraced by the very systems that claim to be awaiting their arrival. Because systems like safety, they like predictability, and you carry revelation. You carry divine interruption. The truth is, you've spent so much time trying to find a space that feels like home, because something deep inside you remembers what spiritual alignment feels like. You're not being difficult. You're being discerning. You're not arrogant for refusing to submit to every voice. You're wise for waiting on the right one. Now let's take it a step deeper. What you're sensing isn't just misalignment with people. It's misalignment with entire energetic blueprints. When your spirit enters a space governed by fear-based control, shame-drenched obedience, or counterfeit light disguised as truth, it begins to recoil. That's not your trauma acting up. It's your discernment sounding the alarm. And that discernment, it's a gift. One you've had since you were a child. Remember those moments way back when you just knew someone wasn't who they pretended to be. When you felt the weight of a room change the moment someone stepped in. When your body rejected praise from people you didn't trust. Even if their words sounded holy, that wasn't paranoia. That was spiritual intelligence. The problem is, the world trained you to ignore it, told you to submit, to conform, to honor voices that were out of alignment with God's true spirit. But every time you did, something in you dimmed. Every time you silenced your intuition to maintain peace, a part of your fire flickered. That's why you felt so empty in places others feel full, because their spirits are feeding off something that leaves you starving. You were made for divine substance, not recycled sermons. So, you withdrew, and the world called it antisocial. The church called it backsliding. Your family called it isolation. But heaven called it consecration. God was pulling you away. Not because you were weak, but because you were about to remember your strength. And when you did, you stopped apologizing. You stopped explaining your boundaries. You stopped defending your silence. You stopped making yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. Because you realized you're not being difficult, you're just different. And that difference is holy. Now, I know what it's like to crave belonging. To want just one room, one circle, one friend who gets it. Someone who sees you beyond the glare. Who understands that your refusal to participate isn't pride, it's prophecy. That your silence isn't passive, it's protective. And while those souls do exist, those rare, anointed mirrors who carry the same frequency, they often don't show up until you've learned to stand alone. Because your strength was never supposed to come from a crowd. It was supposed to come from the quiet, chosen one. You weren't called to systems. You were called to the secret place. To the space where God speaks directly, not through rituals, not through titles, but through resonance. And that resonance can't be found in rooms that only echo old energy. You can only find it by tuning in to the frequency of now, the frequency of spirit, the frequency of your assignment. That's why people don't get you. Why pastors don't know what to do with you. Why bosses feel threatened. Why even close friends sometimes drift away. It's not because you're cold, it's because your warmth would expose their frost. Your authenticity would confront their performance. Your clarity would dismantle their confusion. You are the mirror that doesn't lie. And mirrors like that don't get hung in public places. They're hidden in sanctuaries, preserved for sacred moments. And when the time is right, they're revealed not for attention, but for truth. So stop chasing rooms that never had the capacity to hold you. Stop craving approval from systems that were never supposed to affirm you. You weren't meant to be understood by the old. You were meant to be confirmed by the divine. Let them misunderstand. Let them speculate. Let them try to fit you into doctrines and definitions you've already outgrown, because at the end of the day, it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to continue, to walk boldly in your knowing, to move in obedience to a God they cannot hear because they're still tuned to the last word. But you're tuned to the next one. You are not a student of tradition. You are a steward of transition, chosen one. You were never meant to be a part of what you were born to dismantle. So don't be discouraged when rejection shows up wearing the robes of religion, or the suits of society, or the smiles of friendship. Rejection is often God's redirection, dressed in human misunderstanding. You are not here to be included. You're here to be revealed. And that revelation is coming. It's already begun. There's a heaviness you carry that no one sees. A weight pressed deep into your spirit that cannot be explained, not to friends, not to family, not even to those who say they walk in the Spirit. Because this burden is not of the body. It's not mental stress or emotional confusion. It's the spiritual pressure of being chosen to end an era. Chosen one. What you carry isn't just light, it's closure. And that closure is costly. You didn't just inherit gifts, you inherited the responsibility of ending cycles that have been spinning for generations. Cycles of deception. Cycles of manipulation. Cycles of spiritual compromise and masked control. These aren't just patterns in your personal life. These are spiritual blueprints that have infected entire bloodlines, cultures, churches, and systems. And God looked through time and said, this one, this soul, this child, let them be the final voice. That's why it feels so heavy. Because you're not dealing with your own stuff. You're confronting the residue of what others have normalized. You're carrying the task of closing the door on energies and systems that have overstayed their welcome in the earth. And that's not glamorous. This is the part no one talks about. The nights when your chest feels tight. But not from fear, from pressure. The mornings where you wake up exhausted, even after rest. The strange resistance that shows up right before you speak truth. The unexplainable tension in rooms where everything looks peaceful. But your spirit starts sounding the alarm. This isn't coincidence. It's your calling manifesting in real time. Because ending an era isn't soft work. It's sacred warfare. When you're called to be the finisher of a season, you become a spiritual disruptor. And disruptors attract opposition not always in the form of open conflict, but through subtle resistance, passive hostility, manipulative invitations, seductive offers to stay silent in exchange for comfort, and the most dangerous temptation of all, the lure to go back to something you've already been called out of. Don't go back, chosen one. Even if the old system seems easier. Even if the crowd is still there. Even if the silence gets loud and the loneliness gets sharp. Don't return to what God has already removed His presence from. You are not the remnant to be recycled, you are the remnant sent to reset. And make no mistake, you have already caused a tremor. Just your awareness. Your awakening has shaken the foundations of things that have stood for decades, even centuries. That's why you've been under attack. That's why confusion tried to cloud your mind. That's why people you loved turned cold without warning, because they were spiritually aligned with the system you're called to dismantle, and your awakening exposed their agreement with what you came to end. But don't take it personally. Take it prophetically. They didn't betray you. They revealed who they served. And now, the only question that matters is, will you keep going? Because here's what no one tells you. Endings are lonely. Final chapters are often written in solitude. You're not going to have a parade. There won't be applause. The ones who once called you powerful may now call you problematic. But heaven is not looking for performance. It's looking for obedience. Heaven is not counting your likes. It's counting your alignment. And right now, you're aligned. You may feel off to the world, but in the spirit, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Every tear you've cried in silence, every prayer you couldn't articulate, every whisper of God. I don't understand, but I trust you. It's all been recorded. Not one moment has been wasted. There's a divine shift unfolding. Not just in you, but through you. You're not reacting to change. You are the change, the ripple, the shaking, the final breath of what was, and the first exhale of what is to come. And this shaking, it's not your enemy. It's your evidence. It proves that what you're ending had become too comfortable, too corrupt, too familiar to be questioned. But your presence questioned it. Your very existence revealed its cracks. And now those who once stood firm are trying to stand still, hoping you'll go away. But you won't. Because you didn't come to take sides. You came to take over, not with pride, not with ego, but with truth. And truth, chosen one, is disruptive by nature. Do you remember how Moses was called to go back to Egypt, not to negotiate, not to reform, but to dismantle an empire? That's why Pharaoh hardened his heart. That's why Moses wasn't invited to dine with royalty. Because his assignment was not assimilation, it was confrontation, and you, too, carry that anointing. You are not just carrying revelation. You are carrying divine confrontation. And that confrontation doesn't look like violence. It looks like authenticity, like boundaries, like refusal to play along, like silence in rooms full of noise, like wisdom in moments where others expect war. Because your warfare isn't loud. It's precise. You don't always need to raise your voice. Your energy speaks volumes. Your refusal to perform sends a message that's louder than any sermon. You carry a frequency that cannot be duplicated, and those who operate in counterfeit spirituality can feel it. That's why they avoid you. That's why they talk about you. That's why they try to dismiss you. Because your very existence threatens their illusion, and yet you remain, still breathing, still seeing, still discerning, still rising. You are proof that the old prophecy is ending, not in thunder, but in truth, not in smoke, but in spirit. And that kind of ending doesn't need fanfare. It just needs obedience. Chosen one. This weight you carry, it's not punishment. It's permission. Permission to do what others were too afraid to. Permission to walk away from what once sustained your ancestors, but now poisons you. Permission to say no to altars that demand your silence in exchange for safety. You don't need safety. You need sovereignty. And sovereignty doesn't ask for approval. It simply is. You are sovereign in your calling. Sovereign in your knowing. Sovereign in your ability to end what others keep recycling. And that sovereignty cannot be given to you by man. It was already encoded into your spirit. So if you feel the weight growing heavier, it's not because you're weaker. It's because the final layers are being peeled back. The last illusions are unraveling. And on the other side of this breaking is a clarity that will burn through every system still trying to hold you hostage. You're not crazy. You're called. You're not overreacting. You're overriding. You're not difficult. You're divine. And the weight you carry, it's not just yours. It's the closing of an age, and you were chosen to carry it because God knew you wouldn't drop it. Heaven trusts you. You felt it, haven't you? That eerie sensation walking into a place and knowing something unseen has already noticed you. Not the people, not the chatter, but something deeper, something ancient, something watching. Chosen one. What you're sensing isn't paranoia, it's perception. The moment you step into a space, the old spirits, those ancient energies that have ruled through manipulation, fear, and illusion, feel your presence. And they don't like it. Because your very existence signals their expiration. You are not just a threat to lies spoken aloud. You're a disruption to lies that have gone unspoken for centuries. Energies and spirits that have cloaked themselves in tradition and power can sense when someone arrives carrying a frequency they cannot control. And that someone is you. You may not see it with your natural eyes, but your spirit knows. It always has. You walk into a room and feel tension before a word is said. You enter conversations and sense hidden agendas long before anyone reveals their true colors. You felt this since childhood, those moments when adults smiled. But something behind their eyes felt wrong. That wasn't imagination. That was spiritual intelligence. Chosen one. What most people call sensitivity is actually a finely tuned prophetic radar. And yours, it's not just attuned to the surface. It pierces realms. That's why you can walk into a place and feel the residue of arguments you never witnessed. You can meet someone for the first time and immediately know what they're carrying. Because you're not just reading people. You're reading atmospheres, systems, realms, and those realms recognize you. They remember the vibration of others like you who came before those rare ones, sent not to compromise with darkness, but to cast it out. Souls like yours don't negotiate. You expose, you uncover. You shake the false ground until only truth remains. That's why ancient energies stir when you arrive. Not because you say anything, but because you see everything. Let's be clear. Well, the resistance you face isn't always from people. It's from spirits operating through people. And those spirits don't attack what doesn't threaten them. They attack what announces their end. You, chosen one, are an announcement. Not everyone in your life who turned cold did so because of something you said or did. Some couldn't explain why they suddenly felt triggered around you, why they stopped trusting you, why they began gossiping, distancing, even resenting you. But your spirit knows why. It's because the unclean spirits in them recognized the divine assignment in you and panicked. You don't need to fight them. You only need to stay aligned. Because you were never sent to argue with demons. You were sent to dismantle their systems with your frequency alone. That frequency, that divine energy that radiates from you when you're fully in your truth, is more powerful than any sermon, any ritual, any tradition. It cuts through the air. It pierces veils, and that's why the atmosphere shifts when you walk in. Don't second-guess that shift, even if the people in the room don't acknowledge it, especially if they don't. Some will pretend not to notice. Others will try to silence you, distract you, or draw you into confusion. Because that's what old spirits do when they know the end is near. They create noise. They create chaos. But beneath all the theatrics, they're trembling. Because the prophecy is being undone, and you're the one unraveling it. There's a story in the Gospels where Jesus walks into a synagogue, and a man possessed by an unclean spirit begins to cry out. Jesus hadn't said a word. He hadn't cast judgment. But his presence alone agitated what had been hidden for who knows how long. That spirit didn't speak when others entered the room. But when Jesus walked in, truth embodied. The spirit couldn't hide anymore. That's you. Your presence stirs what's hidden. Your voice, even in silence, reverberates in the spiritual realm. You carry truth in such a pure form that falsity cannot remain comfortable. That's why things break around you, relationships, traditions, group dynamics. Not because you're unstable, but because the environment was never built to sustain the frequency of real light. There's a difference between light that's convenient and light that's divine. The convenient kind dims to accommodate the room. The divine kind exposes what the room has been avoiding. You don't shine to please, you shine to reveal. So don't be surprised when people start distancing themselves after being around you. It's not always personal, it's spiritual. Your light is a mirror, and people who haven't yet faced themselves will often choose to retreat rather than reflect. And that's okay, because your assignment isn't to force people to see. Your assignment is simply to shine. And in that shining, ancient strongholds fall. Chosen one. There are realms that have ruled unchecked for so long. They began to believe they were eternal. But the moment you were awakened, the countdown began. Every time you speak truth, you interrupt their grip. Every time you walk in authority, you reclaim sacred ground. Every time you refuse to conform, you break a generational curse that thought it would last forever. You are the divine interruption. You weren't sent to play nice with what's unclean. You are sent to confront it simply by refusing to bow. And sometimes, confrontation doesn't look like shouting or rebuking. Sometimes, it looks like standing still when others expect you to fold. Sometimes it looks like walking away without explaining yourself. Sometimes, it looks like smiling in silence while your energy does all the talking. You were anointed for this. And that anointing isn't just oil, it's fire. Fire that reveals. Fire that purifies. Fire that dismantles false altars. So the next time you feel that chill in the air, the tension that arrives without explanation, don't question yourself. Recognize it. That's the spirit realm reacting to you. That's the old order sensing its expiration. That's darkness realizing it has run out of time. You're not just another chosen one. You're the closure. And closure doesn't need permission to arrive. It doesn't ask for applause. It just shows up and ends what no longer belongs. So keep walking into rooms like you belong. Keep shining like your light is the final word. Because for some of these systems, for some of these spirits, you truly are. Their last chance, their final warning, the one they never expected would carry such quiet authority. But now that you're here, they know their time is up. There's a blueprint written into your spirit. Chosen one. A divine code that the world can't read. But the spirit realm recognizes instantly. You've always felt it, even if you didn't have the language for it. A pull, a resistance. A constant tension between who you are and what the world tries to mold you into. That tension isn't confusion, it's confirmation. You were never supposed to adapt to the environment. You were designed to override it. Your DNA, your divine nature activated, is not calibrated for comfort. It's encoded with disruption. You don't come from the line of those who maintain illusions. You come from the lineage of those who expose them. This is why you've always felt out of sync. Because you weren't born to echo the world, you were born to embody truth. And truth, especially when it's living and breathing through a person, doesn't just speak. It shakes from the outside. People might look at you and think you're just different. They might say you're intense, too sensitive, too spiritual, too much. But what they don't realize is that you're not just carrying emotions. You're carrying encoded frequencies that are literally dismantling energetic systems everywhere you go. Your gifts aren't just talents. They are tools of spiritual recalibration. Your intuition, it's a divine sonar. Your ability to feel a lie in your bones before it's even spoken, that's spiritual precision. Your discernment, it doesn't just keep you safe. It keeps entire generations from repeating cycles that should have ended long ago. And those gifts weren't learned. They were downloaded. From the moment you took your first breath, heaven marked you. Not to be worshipped, not to be exalted, but to be activated. To serve as a walking frequency of liberation. And because of that, you've never been able to sit comfortably in environments built on control. That discomfort is divine. You were made to challenge what others call sacred when it's really stagnant. To interrupt what others idolize when it's really infected. You don't do this with rebellion. You do it with radiance. You don't shout. You shine. And that shine, it's built into you. Not as a product of ego, but as evidence of your design. You were created to carry light that breaks illusions, light that doesn't need to be explained, only released. So when people try to shrink you, question you, or call you arrogant for simply knowing who you are, it's not because you're off. It's because their reality starts to fracture in your presence. And they're clinging to it for dear life. That's what happens when someone with divine DNA walks into a room full of borrowed identities. You don't match. You never will. And the sooner you stop apologizing for that, the sooner you step fully into the authority you were created for. You weren't made to fit in. You were made to be the key that unlocks others. There are codes in you, spiritual technologies, so ancient and yet so advanced that your very presence causes awakening in others. You speak and suddenly, people remember things their soul had buried. You touch someone's life, and they start questioning everything they thought they knew. Not because you tried to change them, but because you're a living contradiction to the lie they've been living under. This is why the enemy targeted you early. Ever wonder why the attacks came before the calling was even clear? Why the trauma started before you had words to name it? It's because your frequency was detectable. The dark realm doesn't wait for you to mature. It tries to mute you before you realize what's inside of you. But it didn't work, did it? You're still here, still sensitive, still seeing. Still breaking the patterns they tried to bury you under. And even when you doubted yourself, even when you fell into silence, pain, confusion, there was still that divine spark inside. That ember that refused to die. That piece of your soul that whispered, "This isn't the end. Keep going." Chosen one, your very being is prophecy. You don't need to speak in tongues or quote scripture to be divine. You already are. Not because of religion, but because of resonance. You resonate with truth, with alignment, with light that cannot be explained, but also cannot be denied. You walk with energy that makes hidden things reveal themselves. You carry a presence that makes counterfeit alignments crumble. People feel your energy before they hear your voice. And that energy doesn't lie. That's why you intimidate those who depend on illusion. Your authenticity threatens everything they've built their identity on. And so, instead of growing, they reject. Instead of listening, they resist. And still, your spirit does what it was designed to do. It reveals. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone is supposed to. You were encoded for the remnant, for those whose spirits are quietly crying out for something real, something sacred, something not wrapped in performance or platform, but rooted in truth. Those are the ones you were made to activate. And sometimes, you do it by simply being. You don't need a pulpit. You don't need a stage. Your life is the altar. Your journey is the sermon. Every time you choose truth over approval, you are preaching. Every time you walk away from manipulation, you are testifying. Every time you trust your discernment over tradition, you are prophesying. Because this is what divine disruption looks like. It's not flashy. It's not always loud, but it's undeniable. And as you continue walking in that knowing, the world around you will shift. Not all at once, not without resistance, but it will shift. Systems will unravel. Strongholds will fall, and not because you argued, but because you showed up. So don't be discouraged when your blueprint doesn't match anyone else's. Don't panic when your path looks like no one else's map. That's how you know it's divine. Because heaven never calls a chosen one to copy it, calls them to create. You are the beginning of something new. A sacred disruption, a holy contradiction. A blueprint not made by human hands. And even if no one else recognizes it yet, the spirit realm already has. The veil is lifting. The illusion is cracking. And you're still shining. There's a reason your path has always looked unfamiliar. You look around and no one seems to be on quite the same journey. You're not taking the expected steps. You're not reaching the usual milestones. You're not checking the boxes others are obsessed with. And that's not failure, it's faithfulness. Because chosen one, you were never meant to walk the scripted path. You were called to the unscripted. You're not here to follow the trail. You're here to forge one. That's why your life has been filled with detours, delays, divine interruptions. Every time you tried to walk the straight path laid out by society, by tradition, by religion, something in you just stopped, or broke, or fell apart. Not because you're incapable, but because your soul couldn't lie. You couldn't pretend to be okay with a life that was never yours. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from being called to blaze trails. The ache of not knowing what's next. The ache of seeing others celebrate milestones you're not even sure you want. The ache of walking through a fog so thick, the only light is the fire inside of you. But that fire has never gone out, has it? Even when you wanted to quit. Even when you prayed for a normal life. Even when you envied the predictability of those who seem perfectly content with roles, routines, and religion. That fire kept burning. Quietly, relentlessly. Not always loud, but always alive. And that fire, that's your divine compass. You don't need a map. You are the map. God didn't send you with directions, He sent you with discernment. And while others trust in formulas, you walk by frequency. You don't move because it makes sense. You move because it feels aligned. You don't obey because of fear. You obey because you recognize the voice of the one who called you. That kind of obedience is rare. It confuses people, makes them uncomfortable, because you're not following the rules they were taught to revere. You're not performing faith, you're embodying it. You're not doing what's expected, you're doing what's necessary. And sometimes, that looks like walking alone. Sometimes, that looks like saying no when everyone else is saying yes. Sometimes, that looks like standing still while others race ahead, not realizing they're chasing systems God never called them to. You don't chase, you discern. And in that stillness, sometimes painful, often misunderstood, you're being prepared for movements so holy, so unpredictable. They require all of you. Not just your talents, not just your obedience, but your entire being. You are not a servant of systems. You are a servant of spirit, and the spirit doesn't operate by schedule, so let go of the guilt. The guilt for not keeping up. The guilt for not living up to expectations that were never your assignment. You're not late. You're not lazy. You're not behind. You're in divine timing. You're walking a path with no map, but perfect direction. And every step you take is consecrated, even the ones that felt like failures. Even the seasons that looked like silence, because nothing is wasted when you're walking with God. He doesn't just use the victories. He uses the wilderness. He uses the pauses, the heartbreak, the mistakes, the long nights you spent questioning everything. All of it, every piece was a brick in the road, only you could walk. You were never off course. You were off script. And being off script means you often won't have validation. You won't have 10 people cheering you on. You won't have the applause that comes from doing what's familiar. But what you will have is a depth of connection to spirit that no one can take from you. The connection is your anchor, because there will be days where nothing makes sense. Days where your path feels more like exile than elevation. Days where you cry out to heaven and hear nothing in return, but even then, something in your spirit will whisper, "Keep going. You were born for this." That whisper is the echo of your anointing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just knows. And when the world offers you scripts that look good but feel wrong, that knowing will help you say no. That knowing will help you stay grounded when others chase titles. That knowing will help you stay true when compromise would be easier. Because you don't belong to the crowd. You belong to the call. And this call, it's not glamorous. It's not neat. It's wild. It's raw. It's unpredictable. But it's real. It's holy. And it's yours. So embrace the detours. Embrace the fact that your life doesn't look like theirs, that your growth hasn't been linear, that your victories don't fit on a resume. You weren't sent here to build a brand. You were sent here to build an altar, and that altar, it's built in the wilderness, with tears, with trust, with silence so loud it teaches you to hear God in ways others never will. That altar becomes the place where heaven meets earth through you. You are not walking aimlessly. You are walking prophetically. Every time you chose obedience over acceptance, every time you chose integrity over applause, every time you said yes to God and no to the script, you are stepping deeper into your divine assignment. You are not off track. You are the track. And one day soon, others will look back and see the road you walked. And it will make sense. Not because it looked like theirs, but because it led to truth. Because it led to freedom. Because it led to light. You are the evidence that the unscripted path is still sacred. That walking with God, truly walking with Him, will never look like performance. It will look like surrender. It will look like mystery. But most of all, it will look like you. You've probably noticed it by now, how the moment you begin to walk in your truth, something pushes back, not subtly, not passively. Sometimes it's swift, other times it creeps in slowly, dressed like comfort, cloaked in familiarity. But it always comes when you step fully into your light. Chosen one, the old prophecy doesn't let go without a fight. When you were quiet, agreeable, unsure of your authority, they tolerated you. But the moment you started moving in alignment, cutting cords, speaking truth, setting boundaries, choosing obedience over acceptance, everything shifted. You could feel the resistance before it even spoke. And that's because the old system recognized what you had become, a threat, not because you wanted to dismantle anything, but because your presence naturally begins to dissolve anything built on illusion. You're not out to destroy people, but the systems they cling to, the roles they play, the control they depend on. The stories they've made sacred can't survive where truth takes root. And truth has taken root in you. That's why the opposition often feels so personal, even though it's not. It comes through familiar faces, trusted institutions, beloved mentors, even blood relatives. Because the old system doesn't fight you in abstract. It uses vessels, voices, people you once leaned on. It speaks through those who are still under its spell. And when you finally wake up to this, when you realize the attacks are coming, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right, that's when the shift begins to deepen. That's when the breakaway starts. But don't mistake the resistance as a sign you're off course. Quite the opposite. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. Every attack, every slander, every whisper, every cold shoulder, it's a confirmation. A marker in the spirit that you have become a living contradiction to a system that once had its claws in you. You broke the cycle, and now the cycle is breaking back. And here's where it gets real. Some of the people you've loved the most, those you supported, prayed for, wept over, may suddenly see you as the enemy. Not because you changed, but because your clarity disrupted their comfort. Because your refusal to play along exposed how much they were depending on the very system you're called to end. They say you changed. And in some ways, they're right. You're no longer blind. You're no longer afraid. You no longer dance for crumbs of validation. That makes them uncomfortable. Because people who benefit from the old system always fear the one sent to challenge it. Remember the prophets Jeremiah was beaten for telling the truth. Elijah had to flee from royalty because his presence unmasked idolatry. Even Jesus, when he began speaking with real authority, not as a teacher, but as the truth was marked for death. It's no different now, and you're not paranoid. Chosen one, you're perceptive. You feel the shift in people's tone before their words catch up. You feel the tension in a room that used to feel safe. You feel when something sacred has gone stale, and instead of ignoring it, you honor it with silence or distance. That's not coldness. That's discernment. And it's that discernment that makes you dangerous to the old prophecy, because you're not confused anymore. You're not looking to be rescued. You're walking in knowing. And the moment you stepped out of their mold and into your mission, you became living proof that obedience doesn't require a stage, a title, or their approval. You are the evidence that God speaks outside their system, that divine authority doesn't always wear robes, that presence doesn't require performance, That revelation doesn't need a platform. You just need purity, alignment, a heart that says yes. Even if I walk alone. And that kind of yes, it terrifies the system. Because they can't manipulate you anymore. They can't shame you into submission. They can't guilt you with tradition. You've tasted something they can't counterfeit. You've touched something sacred they can't package. You've seen too much to unsee. And that seeing has made you dangerous, but not to the people, to the principality. You are the dismantler of deception, the finisher of formulas, the undoing of cycles. You're not angry. You're activated. And when the system tries to retaliate, as it always does, you won't need to defend yourself. You won't need to explain, because your fruit speaks louder than their fear. And fruit never lies. So keep walking, even when the old turns on you. Keep shining, even when they call it arrogance. Keep discerning, even when they say you're being too critical. Because what they call criticism is often just clarity they're not ready to carry. Don't stop now. You've already walked too far to turn around. You've already seen too much to go back. You've already paid the price in tears and isolation. Don't let guilt return you to a table God already pulled you away from. And yes, it will hurt. Let's not lie about that. You'll grieve people who choose the system over the sacred. You'll miss the closeness, the shared moments, the dreams you thought you'd grow into together. But what you're stepping into is so much bigger. You're not losing them. You're finding you. The you that was hidden beneath layers of obedience to the wrong voice. The you that was shrinking for approval. The you that bent over backwards to be palatable. The you that knew better but was afraid to act on it. That version is gone now, and what's emerging is raw, pure, true, chosen one. They may turn on you, but they cannot turn off what God has ignited in you. You were not made to bow to outdated prophecies. You were made to be the prophecy fulfilled not as they imagined, but as heaven intended. Your life is not a continuation. It's a confrontation, and it is already speaking volumes, whether they acknowledge it or not. So don't slow down. Don't doubt. Don't dim your light just to make the system feel safe again. You weren't called to keep them comfortable. You were called to end the cycle, and you're already doing it. You've probably heard it before, those voices, spiritual or otherwise, urging you to carry the mantle, to fulfill your calling, to honor what's been passed down. And on the surface, that sounds noble. It sounds holy. But deep in your spirit, something doesn't sit right with that script. Because chosen one, you weren't sent to repeat what's already been done. You were sent to redirect it. You are not here to fulfill the prophecy that others have romanticized. You are here to pivot the story, to turn the page, to shift the entire plot away from cycles of performance, of pretending, of passing down what no longer carries divine power. You are not the echo. You are the interruption. And here's the hard truth that most people avoid. Many prophecies people are clinging to were never from God in the first place. They were man-made blueprints dressed in divine language. They were systems disguised as sacred. Institutions built around controlling, not freeing. And while they may have served a purpose once, they've now become idols. Idols don't just sit on altars. Sometimes they wear robes. Sometimes they hold microphones. Sometimes they speak in tongues but carry no truth. And you see through it all. You are given eyes that pierce beyond performance, a spirit that discerns what others excuse, You can feel when something holy has been hijacked by ego. You can sense when anointing has been replaced by ambition. You've stood in rooms that said, "God is here," and your spirit whispered, "No." He left long ago. That's not judgment. That's discernment. That's wisdom born from obedience. And because of that wisdom, God didn't call you to maintain those temples. He called you to leave them behind. Just like Abraham had to walk away from everything familiar in order to birth a new nation. Just like Christ flipped the tables of a religious system too addicted to money and power. Just like Paul was called out of the law he once served in order to preach grace to the unchurched. God is doing the same with you. He's not sending you back to honor the old. He's sending you forward to carry something new. And the path forward, it's not paved in rituals. It's paved in revelation. That's why the steps you take don't look like anyone else's. Why you can't cling to mentors who are still married to systems. Why you've been stripped of dependency, of safety nets, of voices that used to feel like home. Because God is detoxing you from anything that might seduce you back into spiritual submission to what He already left behind. You are being delivered from the need to fulfill anyone's expectations, but heaven's. And heaven isn't asking you to be a copy. It's asking you to be a catalyst for freedom, for truth, for awakening that doesn't need validation to exist, for divine authority that doesn't require robes, pulpits, or degrees, for anointing that drips from obedience, not from performance. It's time you stop calling this journey strange. It's time you stop apologizing for the way your path looks. You weren't called to follow a crowd, you were called to carve a future. You are the evidence that God isn't done speaking, that He's still raising voices who won't bow to tradition, that He's still awakening souls who can't be bought, that He's still whispering directions to those who don't need a stage to obey. And because of that, you've become a threat not to people, but to patterns. People who are stuck in those patterns might lash out. They might mislabel you. They might try to call you back into what's familiar, using language like honor or legacy. But you must ask yourself, what are they really asking me to honor? Because honoring what was is only sacred if what was is still in alignment. But when the system has drifted from spirit, when it starts demanding conformity instead of truth, honor looks like walking away, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence. Reverence for the voice that called you. Reverence for the anointing that flows when you obey. Reverence for the souls attached to your assignment, souls that cannot afford for you to delay your emergence because of nostalgia or fear. You are not betraying anyone by obeying the fresh voice of God. You are simply saying yes to a chapter that hasn't been written yet, and your yes is costly. It always has been. You've felt the loneliness, the questioning, the ache of walking with clarity that isolates you from those still chasing crowds. But that ache, it's not weakness. It's evidence that your yes is real. Real obedience will always separate you before it elevates you. And right now, you may feel the stretch, the friction, the pull between the comfort of the old and the unknown of the new. But let this be your confirmation you were not made to repeat history. You were made to rewrite it, not with arrogance, not with rebellion, but with the quiet, unshakable authority of someone who knows who sent them. Because when you truly know the voice of the one who called you, every other voice, every system, every tradition, every false prophecy fades into background noise. You're not here to be loud. You're here to be clear. And clarity is what this generation needs. Not recycled sermons, not scripted prayers, but living testimonies. walking temples, sacred souls who move not by fear or formula but by fire. That fire burns in you. It always has. So don't dim it to make them feel safe. Don't shrink it to keep the peace. You are not responsible for their comfort. You are responsible for your call, and your call doesn't echo the past. It announces the future. Chosen one, you weren't born to echo an old word. You were born to be the fresh one, the word becoming flesh, all over again, not in perfection, but in presence. Not to impress, but to impact. You are not here to honor what's broken. You are here to build what's true. And heaven has already confirmed it. Now walk. There's something you need to understand. Chosen one. Your very existence makes darkness nervous. Not because you're loud, not because you're confrontational, but because you carry a light that's not just for illumination. It's for demolition. You are not merely here to shine. You're here to dismantle. And that light in you, it's not sweet, gentle ambiance. It's divine fire. It's the kind of fire that burns away illusions, exposes what's been hiding in plain sight, and calls everything around it to either rise or fall. That's why people stare. That's why some are drawn to you like moths, and others retreat like shadows before dawn. You're not dangerous because of what you say. You're dangerous because of what you carry. Most people don't realize this. But energy precedes speech. Spirit speaks before your mouth does. Before you enter a room, your light has already entered. And when that light shows up, anything pretending to be pure starts to tremble. Not out of fear of you, but out of fear of being revealed. You don't need to expose people with words. Your presence does it naturally. And this is why you've been misunderstood most of your life. Because people can't always articulate what they feel around you. They just know they're either deeply drawn or deeply triggered. And neither of those reactions are about your personality, they're about your presence. You make the atmosphere shift. You recalibrate the room. You realign what has been spiritually crooked for too long. And that kind of spiritual authority doesn't come from reading books or quoting scripture. It comes from surviving fire without losing your light. And you've survived. You've been through heartbreak that should have shut you down. Isolation that should have driven you mad. Attacks that came from those closest to you. Spiritual confusion that made you question your sanity. And still, here you are clearer, stronger, and more activated than ever. Don't let anyone convince you that's a coincidence. You've been kept protected, covered in places where you didn't even realize how much danger you were in. And that protection wasn't because you were special in the eyes of man. It was because you are essential in the plans of heaven. And heaven doesn't protect what isn't necessary. You are necessary, not optional, not accidental, not a placeholder. You are a walking interruption to everything the enemy hoped would last forever. That's why the warfare has been so personal. That's why people have tried to isolate, shame, gaslight, and spiritually manipulate you, because the one thing darkness fears more than confrontation is clarity. And you, chosen one, are clear. You're not confused about what's real and what's performance. You know the sound of God's voice. You recognize false light the moment it speaks. You discern spirits others still call gifts. And that discernment is a weapon. Not a weapon that wounds, but one that reveals. And when something is revealed, it loses its power to deceive. You are the revealer. You've tried to downplay it, tried to pretend you didn't notice. tried to shrink your knowing just to keep the peace. But every time you do, something in you dies a little, because you weren't designed to fit into the very systems your light was created to collapse. So stop dimming. Chosen one, stop apologizing for the tension you bring into a room. That tension isn't you being too much. That's your spirit confronting what has gone unchallenged for far too long. That's your presence activating what's been sleeping. You are the final frequency, the one the enemy hoped would never rise. The one he tried to silence through trauma. The one he tried to confuse through religion. The one he tried to distract through relationships. But none of it worked. Because what's in you is older than fear, stronger than shame, and louder than lies. And now that you're rising, darkness has no choice but to fall. That's why it's been fighting you so hard lately. Because it knows this is the moment it can no longer pretend. And the Spirit of God has chosen to make that truth known through you. That's not ego. That's obedience. You didn't choose this. It chose you. And all you've done is say yes. But that yes has flipped tables. That yes has rerouted bloodlines. That yes has unmasked leaders, systems, and spiritual performances. That yes has placed a target on your back because heaven knows what you're carrying. And so does hell. But here's the good news. Hell can't stop it because your light isn't from this world. It's been refined in the furnace. It's been forged in the quiet. It's been confirmed in moments when no one saw but heaven did. You are walking proof that silence is not absence, that hiddenness is not weakness, that being overlooked by man often means being seen by God. And God has seen you. He's seen the nights when you almost gave up. He's seen the days you questioned everything. He's seen the hours you spent wrestling with your assignment, unsure if you even wanted to continue. And still, he kept whispering. Go, not because the path would be easy, but because the world couldn't afford for you to stop. So yes, your light makes the shadows nervous. It makes systems uncomfortable. It makes people question what they've accepted as truth. That's not rebellion. That's resurrection. The resurrection of real holiness, of real connection, of real power. And that power, it's waking up, not just in you, but through you. Spreading, shifting, drawing others into remembrance, into truth, into alignment with something greater than religion, greater than fear, greater than performance. You are the spark, the one who makes people remember who they really are. Not with pressure, not with perfection, but with presence. And presence is everything. So if you've been wondering why you feel such resistance, why doors slam, why people ghost you, why spiritual spaces turn cold the moment you speak, and this is your confirmation. It's because you're not here to continue what was. You're here to confront it. You're here to collapse it. You are not the return of something old. You are the release of something new. And what's new cannot be contained. There's something sacred about simply standing, not fighting, not explaining, not defending, just standing in who you are, in what you carry, in the light that radiates from you without effort. And chosen one, that's exactly how you end what's been plaguing generations. You stand. You don't have to scream to shift atmospheres. You don't have to debate to dismantle deception. You don't even have to be seen to be sovereign. Because when your presence is rooted in truth, your posture alone speaks what centuries of noise could not. And for you, your posture has always been different. Even before you fully knew who you were. You felt it. You'd walk into places and instinctively feel the need to pull back not out of fear, but out of deep knowing. A holy instinct to not engage with what didn't align. You weren't trying to be mysterious. You were trying to stay clear. Because clarity is your superpower. You see through things, through people, through systems, not with judgment, but with a deep, reverent sadness. Because you know most people are just asleep. Repeating patterns, reciting roles, clinging to illusions because they're afraid of the silence that truth brings. And that silence, you've had to make peace with it. You've had to learn how to sit with it, walk with it, let it grow roots inside of you. And now, it's what protects you, because you've learned the power of standing still when others demand you move. The power of staying silent when others expect noise. The power of not participating in chaos just to prove a point. That restraint is not weakness, it's wisdom. And that wisdom is what ends the cycle. You don't fight the old system with the same energy it uses. You don't match manipulation with manipulation. You don't clap back at slander. You don't beg for understanding. You know better now. You know that when the light of God rests on a person, it's not their volume that confirms it, it's their vibration. And your vibration, chosen one, is disruptive. Not because it's loud, but because it's true. Truth has a weight to it, a presence, a resonance that exposes everything not built on solid ground. And when you carry that weight not in performance, but in peace, you don't have to prove yourself. You become the proof. This is why people feel off around you, why they're both curious and cautious. You're not playing a role. You're not putting on spiritual costumes. You're not mimicking righteousness. You are what they're pretending to be. And that authenticity, it ends things. Cycles of performance. Cycles of confusion. Cycles of manipulation disguised as mentorship. It all crumbles when someone walks in, carrying a light that doesn't lie. You are that someone. The reason your mere presence makes people flinch is because you carry the opposite frequency of everything false. You are the anti-venom to religious poison, the contradiction to spiritual elitism, the dismantling of generational delusion. And you do it just by being, not trying, not striving, not preaching, just being fully aligned. And here's what makes you even more dangerous to darkness. You're not here to prove anything. You're not obsessed with platforms. You don't need the spotlight. You've been in the wilderness too long to care about applause. You just want truth. You just want what's real, what's holy, what's sacred. And that desire, that purity of intention, it's rare. It's dangerous because it can't be bought. And when something can't be bought, it can't be controlled. That's why you're seen as a threat, not because you're destructive, but because you're free. Free people don't need to manipulate. They don't need to perform. They don't need to fit in. They move how Spirit tells them to move. They say what Spirit tells them to say. And they rest when Spirit tells them to rest. You have that freedom now. Even if it's quiet. Even if it still feels unfamiliar. You've been unhooked from the matrix of spiritual manipulation. And now you're standing in a field of clarity that scares people who are still tethered. Let your freedom make people question their chains. Let your clarity cause them to rethink their roles. Let your peace be the protest. Because for some, just watching you stand will trigger the awakening they've been too afraid to face. And that's the whole point. You don't end cycles by force. You end them by embodiment. by being the one who doesn't participate in the game, by being the one who leaves the table when manipulation is served, by being the one who doesn't need to be right because you're already aligned. And that alignment, it speaks louder than sermons, louder than signs, louder than the noise people use to avoid truth. It speaks through your eyes, your energy, your silence, your refusal to play roles that were never yours to begin with. You are the closure. And when you truly realize that, when you finally accept, that your presence alone is enough to shift timelines, close gates, dismantle deception, you stop fighting battles that aren't yours. You stop explaining yourself to people who are spiritually deaf. You stop trying to fit into rooms that shrink your vibration because you're no longer looking for a seat at the table. You are the table. And the remnant, those who are ready, will find their way to you, not because you went looking, but because your frequency called them home. So stand, even when it feels lonely, even when the accusations come, even when old spirits try to lure you back with flattery, with guilt, with twisted versions of honor. Stand anyway, because your standing breaks chains. Your standing ends the cycle. Your standing rewrites the prophecy. You don't need to fulfill the old word. You are the final punctuation, the amen. You've heard it your whole life, haven't you? That you have a purpose, that you're called, that you're chosen. But what they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you, is that your choosing wasn't about fulfilling some romantic idea of destiny. It was about becoming the final chapter in a story that needed to end. Chosen one. You are not the continuation of what's been. You are the completion. And the completion doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with finality. There's a silence that follows endings. A stillness. A sacred hush that wraps around the soul when something ancient takes its last breath. You've been feeling that, haven't you? That strange quiet, not the absence of purpose, but the settling of it. The awareness that something has finished inside of you. That what you once chased no longer matters. That what once moved you no longer fits. That you've stopped trying to fulfill expectations you never agreed to in the first place. That's not apathy. That's arrival. You've arrived at the place where purpose becomes embodiment, where calling becomes clarity, where movement becomes meaning. And in that space, you realize you don't need permission anymore. You don't need validation. You don't even need understanding. Because what you carry now can't be explained. It can only be felt, known, lived. This is where the old prophecy loses its power over you. Not because it was false, but because it's finished. It served its time. It carried generations as far as it could. But the next shift, this new awakening, requires something it cannot give. It requires you. Not the version of you that tried to mimic the past, but the one who is the future. And this future, it doesn't need another echo. It needs a voice, your voice, even when it trembles, even when it breaks, even when it shakes the very ground you're standing on. That voice is the trumpet at the end of time for everything false, everything forced, everything performative. When you speak, things shift. When you move, structures realign. When you are just, our cycles close. You are the closing argument to a centuries-long debate about what's real and what's ritual. And your life, your path, your obedience has already spoken what could never be said from a stage. You've already done more than you realize. Your survival alone is a testimony. The fact that you're still here after the betrayals, after the isolation, after the pressure that tried to crack your soul is the clearest evidence that you are not here to be a pawn. You are here to be a pillar. And pillars don't move when the room gets loud. They hold everything up. That's you. You've held it. Quietly. Relentlessly. Without needing credit. Without demanding recognition. You've stood in storms that would have crushed anyone else. You've walked through spiritual wildernesses where God's voice was the only thing keeping you sane. And still you're here, ill, not broken, rebuilt, not bitter, refined, not lost, laser-focused. You've become the prophecy's final chapter. Not the one they expected, but the one heaven prepared. You are not the fulfillment of an old word. You are the foundation of a new one. A word that doesn't repeat cycles. A word that speaks freedom, alignment, divine authority, and for those still stuck in the past, you may always feel like too much, too different, too sharp. But that's okay. You weren't sent for the masses. You were sent for the remnant. The few who would hear your spirit and remember their own. So don't soften your message for comfort. Don't dilute your presence for approval. Don't rewrite your calling to fit inside systems that were never meant to house someone like you. You are the house now, the temple, the altar, the fire. You are what they've been waiting for and fearing, not because you're arrogant, but because you're accurate. You carry something ancient and fresh at the same time. Something they can't manipulate. Something they can't predict. Something they can't control. You carry truth. And the final chapter of any story always belongs to truth. Let this be your confirmation. You don't owe the old prophecy anything. Not your time, not your loyalty, not your energy. It is finished. And the moment you embrace that, you step fully into what you were always called to be the beginning of something holy, the start of a new sound, the pulse of a higher frequency, the spark of a reformation that doesn't need names or stages or rituals, just alignment. And you, chosen one, are aligned. So rise, speak, stand, glow, because it's already happening. You've already begun. The final chapter has already been written. And the last line, it's you. Breathe. Chosen one. Let your soul rest for a moment. You've carried so much, questioned so much, released so much, and yet, here you are intact, whole in places that once felt shattered, quiet in places that once begged for noise, still and sovereign. This is your confirmation. You are protected. You are guided. You are seen. Heaven knows your name, not the one the world gave you, but the one written in fire across eternity. You haven't missed your moment. You haven't taken too long. Everything that tried to delay you only deepened your roots. And now, your roots are reaching the waters of divine timing. You are not behind. You are becoming. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. And nothing, no lie, no label, no limitation can cancel the assignment you were born with. It's unfolding now, in silence, in strength, in steps that may not make sense to others, but make perfect sense to God. So breathe. Let the weight of old expectations fall off your shoulders. Let the fear of being misunderstood evaporate in the light of who you've become. You're not here for everyone, but for those you are meant to reach. Your voice will be a lifeline. So speak, shine, stand. You are covered. You are chosen. You are ready. And as you walk this path unscripted, unseen, unmatched, know this: you do not walk alone. Heaven walks with you. Spirit breathes through you. And the one who sent you will finish what he started. Now rise and go light up the world. God bless you.